Hey everyone, today we've got Chris Man Loomis back on the channel for episode number 3. Chris Man, in case you missed episodes 1 and 2, I'll link to those in the right corner. So, what do we have today, Chris? What's on the agenda?
Thanks again for the opportunity to be back. It's always great to talk to you, Mike. We've got three things I think we can talk about today. We can talk about the unaging system, which I'm developing. Some recent hard news for me, at least, about fasting and my latest research into that. And then last, I thought we would talk about my disastrous summer and how you should take care of your skin, not doing what I did. I think those are the things we've got to talk about today.
All right, so the unaging system. So, this is more of a cardiovascular marathon hit training. So, why don't you, if you could detail what so first of all, what's the backstory on that? And then what's the goal? And then if you could tell us about the people that were involved. So basically you ran like your own little study
Mm-hmm.
and then go through the results. So basically from start to finish. So yeah, telling us all about it.
Thanks. So after I did the marathon, which I talked about in our last podcast, I was talking to one of my friends of mine who's not as fit, hasn't done as much, a younger guy, and he said that was really impressive. I'm inspired. I'd like to do something, but I don't know what. I still get out of breath walking up a single flight of stairs. And it was funny for me because I've been like, well, I've been talking about how to live your healthy life. What are the exercises you should do? What makes the most difference for longevity for a few years with this friend and others. And yet they really hadn't quite understood where they could step into it to start the thing or what they should do. So after talking to him, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to put together a program and a system and actually help people to be their best selves. And the thing that I've always focused on very closely is how to get the most benefit for the least time. Because if you're a multimillionaire living in your house trying to optimize your longevity, it's easy to spend an hour every day doing exercise in your own personal gym, right? No names named. But for most of us, it's hard to find the time to do these things. But I've been working to find what are the key components of exercise that would enable you then to be able to spend less, like an hour and a half total time in a week, and still be able to add 20 years to your life. And I realized that just writing a blog about it, saying you should do high intensity interval training, you should strength train, you should walk more, you should eat the right foods and stuff, wasn't really getting across to people because it's kind of like everyone honestly knows that anyway, right? It's not a mystery that you should be exercising, but lots of the advice out there is much more general. So instead, I decided to actually put it into a system and say, okay, we're going to build lifelong habits that will make you healthy today and live longer tomorrow. And we're going to build them in such a way that it actually helps you to build those habits as part of your life. So it's not just sort of like a thing that you're thinking about, or you do it for like a week and then you have the next thing, so you stop doing the previous thing. So I'm designing a 1 year long plan. Right now, I'm in the testing phase, as you mentioned. So I have 15 friends here who are doing it with me, friends and acquaintances. And we've already finished the first 3 months of it. The first 3 months of it I call the cardio kickoff. And actually, all 15 of them were able to finish it. And it's really inspiring because they're at all levels of fitness. One of the things I had at the beginning is, okay, have you cardio trained before? Have you done high intensity interval training? HIIT. And we had a good mix of all kinds of people. Some people, like my friend who had difficulty climbing a set of stairs, had really done kind of nothing, had done no consistent work. And so it was set up a community for it. So we had a chat channel that we were talking about. I set up spreadsheets to track it. Other people could see sort of how the thing was going, and people could encourage the other people. And we found it to be very important to, first of all, have tracking. So everyone who was in the program got themselves some kind of a quantitative watch or something that would then tell them, how are you doing? What's your resting heart rate? What's your VO2 max? An estimate. All the wearables have an estimate, right? What's your heart rate variability? And so then we use that to go throughout the entire 3 month period of the first cardio kickoff to track and see, okay, how is it going? And even before that, people were starting to realize, first of all, in the first month, it was quite hard. As I said, only an hour and a half a week, but an hour and a half a week of some hard exercise is still quite hard. And some of them were surprised that it was hard. I'm like, it's hard for me too. Like if you're doing high intensity interval training, it's maximum effort. And my maximum effort is no easier than your maximum effort. It's always hard. So it was a challenge for the first week of it. But let me share sort of some of the ways that how it went for people. So for instance, here we've got this is in the very first a comparison between the heart rate. This is taken, I think, by a Garmin, and he's doing high intensive interval training. So this is one of the people who is untrained at the start of it, and he's trying to run full out and then do a light jog and then full out and a light jog. And you can see at the start of the program, it's really hard to see that there's even any difference there between the full effort and sort of the light jogs. But by the end of it, 3 months later, you can say, oh, wow. Like, first of all, when he does the jog to start it, it doesn't even move basically his metrics. And then you can see that he's got these very clearly defined peaks and goes through that and then is able to rest after that. His heart rate recovers very quickly, which, as you know, is a sign of being well-trained and adapted to the exercise. So I was really happy going through it. The people there gave about 93% of them gave it a 4 or a 5 out of a 5 scale rating. They had improved metrics throughout in their VO2 max, their resting heart rate, their heart rate variability. And I got a lot of comments at the feedback from the group of sort of like talking and hearing how it was going for other people, hearing about other people's suffering and triumphs. And also the flexibility of finding places, different ways to exercises and supporting each other to say, okay, well, not everything has to be a run. Some of the people didn't like running, and so they would define a different way of getting in their high intensity exercise, but always making sure to be consistent about that. So that was just the first segment of it. Now we're already in the second quarter of it, which is the strength challenge. So they've already dialed some of that high intensity interval back to be in a maintenance phase where they can continue to grow up but at a slower pace. But that habit now is well established. Now for them, that's just kind of a weekly thing that they do every week. And now we're getting in very deep and focusing on the strength training, what it is to have a maximally efficient, time-efficient strength training that you can do kind of just in a few visits a week and yet still get significant gains during that period. So I'm really excited about it, as I've felt like this is the first time that the advice that I've had is really making an impact. So I'm testing with my friends, with these about 15 people, and I'm hoping to have a large number of people who will test this in the year of 2025. So I'm currently accepting pre-registrations. For people who are interested, you can go to unaging.com and go to the unaging system and sign up there and participate. The program's all free. My personal benchmark, as I like to keep track of it, is how many years of life has the research that I've done saved, right? So this is 15 people, okay, 20 years per person. That's about 300 years of life from these initial 15 people.
Wait, a couple quick questions, Chris.
Go ahead.
So the plot you showed with the average heart rate, you know, and then the person, right? So that's beautiful data. I wonder if so. Were there physical and cognitive benefits or any benefits? Did the person notice that they felt better? Because so you'd assume left to right, obviously you're more cardiovascularly fit on the right versus the left, right? So was there subjective feelings of improvement where they could feel that difference, or this is just something that they've got going on the inside? They don't even know it subjectively. They're the same.
No, the people definitely noticed it. One of the guys who had not done training before, basically he was doing runs because that was the best way to measure the heart rate things. And basically every week he would have a new record, personal best record for the fastest he'd ever run. And I noticed it with other fellows as well. The fellow who had trouble climbing up the stairs, by the end of it, we went on a bit of a travel through the city of Tokyo together. And he was right on my heels as we're going up and down stairs throughout the stations. And it was immediately apparent that these are different people sort of than as far as their ability to just move through the world had been significantly changed. Yeah, so the numbers were kind of a nice way to keep track of it, but the feedback that I got is that very much it was they just felt more comfortable and effortless moving through their daily lives.
Cool. And then also, how did each person, or maybe you did, prescribe their fitness days, right? So were you using like HRV, resting heart rate, to guide it, or it was just feel that, you had a set, was it, you had a set time? It was the hour and a half a week. That was the goal, or
Hmm.
it was as many days as you can get in. Like, so what was the prescription? How were people prescribed? Because I'm sure that there was a range of, some people maybe did more than 150 minutes per week. Maybe some people did less. So how is that? How did you come to, or how did they come to that prescription?
So there was a protocol that was shared for everyone as far as amount of minutes of high intensity and low intensity. But the protocol started out a little bit less actually than an hour and a half as they worked into it. One of the things that I'll be adapting is that I really want this to be available to everyone. We did have some people who were very much out of shape, who was a real challenge for. And from the feedback I got from them, and they still were able to complete the challenge, is that they said, okay, look, when I started, there was no high intensity. I was just doing the running or whatever it was, and that was enough. But by the end of 3 months, they were able to do that. So each person was able to, select for what they could do and work through. But there was no timing of it because of the outset of it. Honestly, an hour and a half a week is not much. You would be doing 2 to 3 hours of yourself right now, right? Depending on sort of your biometrics. So because it was low enough, I felt comfortable saying when you have the time. And one of the things about aerobic exercises as well is that aerobic is pretty much straight linear. Like as long as you're doing the time in the week and you're not doing too much, and you can do up to about, I think I figured out before, is about 2.5 hours of high intensity total time before you start to crater. At that point, then you're no longer getting the benefit of the high intensity and your performance starts to degrade. But we were far below that for the entire time. So as a result, they were able to time it when it worked for them in their schedule. They also eventually figured out that you didn't actually have to put a day between of rest between aerobic exercise. You can do that 2 days in a row. And in fact, if you want to, you can do two workouts in a row. So they're like, wait, you mean I could just do an hour and a half and just be done in one, like on Monday of the week? And I'm like, you can. It's not fun, but I'm not going to tell you it won't work. I don't think anyone ever took up that challenge. But I did have guys who, like, the week got busy or something, and so instead on the Sunday they would do an hour of workout instead of doing 2 days of a half hour. So it was very much up to them on how they felt, but also what they were able to schedule in the work within the week, because it's supposed to be something that you do to help you live the rest of your life better, as opposed to the new focus of your life.
Yeah, that's great. So since you have the data, I mean, technically you could compare for the people who did, the hour and a half in one session, an hour a couple times a week, and then the 20 minuters, right?
Hmm.
Even though you have, I think you said 15 people.
Hmm.
Um, which approach may be best for, improvements in cardiovascular fitness, whether it's, HRV, resting heart rate, the average heart rate, technically you could compare. So for the person who says, I want to do an hour and a half session per week, if you've got a group of people, which you do, that
Hmm.
are doing 20 minutes a day, you
Hmm.
could say, look, the 20, now granted, you have other factors like, is there weight loss? Is it adjusted for age and sex and all this other stuff, right? But
Right.
you could say, look, the 20-minute group maybe it's true, whatever the
Hmm.
data would be, maybe I'm presuming it,
Hmm.
right? But if the 20-minute group had better gains relative to the once per week or twice per week versus 5 or 6 days of shorter,
Hmm.
you could say, well, why not give this a try too and see how your body adapts? Maybe your body is more physiologically adapted to shorter more often. And then you could even go conversely, right? So for the people who are doing 20 minutes a week, would they benefit? Like, what is the best approach at the end? I get where you're, this is
Hmm.
great, as a start, right? But my analytical brain
You
wants
want to
to,
try all the
yeah, like,
right.
and maybe that's something down the road. At the beginning, it's behavioral modification and being able to consistently do these things over time forever, right? Because which
Hmm.
goes into my,
Right.
the idea of lives. years of lives saved, right? So
Mm-hmm.
does 3 months of improving fitness translate for,
Mm-hmm.
another 50 plus years,
Mm-hmm.
so midlife rapamycin extends lifespan, right? Just for a short period of time. So does improving your fitness for 3 months, does that carry? Or you've got to maintain it. You've got to do it consistently over the next, 50 years to gain those benefits. So no, it's a great start. Don't get me wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't jump the gun on saying, how many lives yet. It's
Oh, you're absolutely right. So I don't if they start and stop, there's no I don't think you get any credit for that. I mean, high school athletes don't live that much appreciably longer, I think, than people who never were athletes. So the design behind it as a result of that is that, for instance, the high intensity interval training then continues throughout the entire year. The first 3 months is spent establishing the habit, learning how to do it, getting comfortable with it, and then it's maintained throughout that entire year, so then it's a lifelong habit. Because as you point out, if they it's not you don't get that much life saving if you stop it, but if you continue that for a half hour or so a week for the rest of your life, consistency is the winner in the marathon of life. So I don't know about for the trial that we did. I don't have enough data yet to make a distinction between the 1 hour a day versus the 20 minutes a day. Hopefully, maybe when we have 100 people or 1,000 people participating, then I'll be able to do more analysis on those kind of things.
Yeah, believe it or not, even though I'm technically in the hour and a half twice a week, the 20 minutes or 30 minutes per day, that's probably going to be the better group where they
Hmm.
end up with either it's faster gains with less overtraining, or, just, higher heart rate variability, lower resting heart rate. That would be my bet, even though technically I'm not in that category yet. So we'll see how it plays out. All right.
Hmm.
So strength. So are you focusing on compound movements? Is it the same 20 minutes a session? So what's the strategy in terms of designing the approach there?
So once again, we're looking at the maximizing the immediate health and all time and long term longevity. So for the strength, then we're dealing basically take they've been doing 3 high intensity workouts. So we take 2 of those out and replace them with a strength training, and it's a half hour each time. So this is the optimal amount. When you look at the longevity studies for what gets you the most longevity out of strength training, it's very clear that the correct answer is an hour total time per week. So, okay, so now we have half an hour of high intensity interval training, and then we add into that an hour of strength training in 2 sessions. And so, very much so, as you appropriately guessed, for the strength training, it's mostly focused on the compound movements. If you're only doing a half an hour and you want to do a full body workout, then very much you want to be getting into the big exercises. So we've been focusing on that quite a bit, and I've actually been meeting with every single person in a one-to-one weightlifting session just to say, okay, let's talk about this. This is how you do this. This is how you do the big exercises, the bench, lat pull downs or rows for back. So a push, a pull, and also a leg exercise. And the leg exercise as much as possible, focusing on just straight deadlifts and squats. Because those are great exercises, as you know, that are going to give you a lot of stimulation for the strength training for them. And they're exercises that require precise form in order to do them safely and well. So I've got some documents that I've been sharing with everyone. I've been going, okay, this is Ripto's YouTube guide on how to do a squat. This is Ripto's YouTube guide. He's one of the experts on weightlifting of how to do deadlifts. And then I go and meet with them, and then we've also been talking through that to make sure that they have their form right. And it's really just 3 exercises: a push, a pull, and a leg exercise. And they get to pick sort of what they do with what they have around them. One fellow for a while was working with kettlebells, basically, as his primary exercise. Another one has a Holden gym, and he's using dumbbells for all of them. Many of them then go to the gym and have been going to the gym and learning how to use the squat bar, the squat rack, and then also be doing the deadlifts and things. So people have been able to do it, but the foundation is what I found that really helps people to say, okay, look, these are the 3 exercises. We're doing it twice a week. It's half an hour, and we do that for the next 3 months.
And then the goal is as many sets and reps within that 30-minute period, or is it, X amount of each? So 5 sets of bench, 5, 5, 5, 5. It's just as much as you can do in that 30-minute span.
Oh, we've got it all. I made a spreadsheet to track it for everyone, and then we've got a progress board so you can see basically how everyone is doing. And I wasn't sure about the progress board, right? Like that's kind of part of the social aspect of it. But many people found it very motivating actually to see, okay, everybody else is doing this, right? Like I should be updating my progress board. And I use one of the common weightlifting formulas then to calculate what the one rep max is. So if you say bench press 50 kilograms, or I can't do that off 100 pounds, like 50 kilograms for 10 reps, then there's formulas on the internet that will calculate for you then what your probable one rep max is, what the maximum you could lift at one time is. And so then that gives you comparison. So if one day you do, say, 50 kilograms for 12 reps, and then the next day you do 55 kilograms for 10 reps, you can know whether you are effectively doing more weightlifting, whether you worked harder. And so then the spreadsheet then gives tracking for that for every exercise and shows how you did, and then also shows how everyone else did so that you can see and kind of feel how you're doing. And everyone's been able to put that in and sort of enter it with their own thing, but it gives a structure to just say, okay, look, we're doing 3 sets of these 3 exercises, and you basically find something so that you should be struggling to finish on the last reps of the last set. And after that, then you sort of select what works for you with the environment that you have.
So generally, there's about a 3 rep loss for each 10-pound increase. So if you're doing 10 reps at 50 kilograms, well, let's say 50 pounds because it's easier for me, my dumb American brain, to think in pounds.
Sure.
I'd have to. So it's 150 kilograms, 110 pounds, 2.2. Anyway, so 50 pounds. If you're doing 10 reps at 100 pounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's generally your 1RM would probably be around 130. So you just 110, you could probably do 110 for 7, 120 for 4, and then 130 for 3. But that's just a general, ballpark estimate. So it's I think you said 3 sets of each exercise, so 9 sets in that 30-minute span.
Yeah.
So even though it's only 30 minutes, technically, you can do it where it's supersetted, and there may be people who are doing more than or can do more than 9 sets. So, for example, my workouts are essentially circuit training based. So I'm not training for my 1RM. I'm trying to keep it in that 10 to, well, I do lower rep ranges sometimes, but still it's circuit training based where it's constant movement the whole time. It's not one set, wait 3 minutes, do another set. So you could and probably get a pretty strong cardiovascular stimulus, granted not as much as doing an all-out sprint for 20, 30, 40 seconds, whatever it is. But so is it geared, are you trying to do like a circuit training based workout, or it's only 9 sets? As long as you get those 9 sets, just chill, you're good.
So at this point, and I mean, there's a flow of information as we're going through it. So that's one of the other things that I've worked to help support people and kind of keep them aware of the challenge and keep it interesting, right? So we don't say this is what you're doing and then have them do it for 12 weeks and then say good job and here's the next challenge. So as we're going through it, so for instance, I hope, well, I mean, if they're watching it, it's fine. I haven't actually talked about supersetting yet because it's a great idea, as you point out, and it's a good way to compress the total amount of time. I was planning to tell them about that in after the first 2 months are done. So at the beginning of the 3rd month, I would say, by the way, you can further compress the amount of time that you take to do this by doing supersetting, which is then going to give you more benefit for each of them, and you don't need to spend as much time waiting between. But for this point, at least, especially, I mean, in the first month was honestly, most people were kind of figuring out getting a gym membership. Like, where do I do this? What are these exercises like? How do I enter into the spreadsheet? The 2nd month now, I feel like they're starting to really hit the road. Many of them are taking creatine, which is one of the things I offered as like an extra credit. This is going to help you to lift. It's pretty harmless and will definitely give you more reps. But that sort of gives them something to work with so that it continues to interest them. But the offer, though, of like doing more things, they totally could. But the drive is to say, this is what you, pardon me, this is what you need to do. And once you do this, you're done. You get out of the gym. This is not, of course you could do more, but honestly, it's going to start to get less healthy if you're doing more than a total time of an hour. And like that's an hour, I think, of normal people exercise. And as we talked about, compound exercises are much more stressful than even normal exercise. So I've actually, and many of them do much more exercise. Some of them have said, huh, you want me to exercise 3 times a week for 30, or 2 times a week for 30 minutes. I already do it every day. And I've been like, hey, great. But my advice is to say you don't need to do that much. This is a long-term thing. You're already going to gain even just doing it twice a week. And so the program is just to do the 3 sets and superset them, if you will, to save more time, and then to get on with your day.
All right. So then the third aspect, which I know is generally underrated in your approach, is, the flexibility training. And
Hmm.
so a paper was recently published, and I'm probably going to make a video on this at some point, but
Hmm.
they actually looked at, there's a standard way to assess flexibility
Hmm.
of, I think, all the major joints: ankle, knee, hip, shoulder, trunk.
Hmm.
Um, and so they looked at that in association with your favorite measure, all-cause mortality risk. And
Ah.
as expected,
Hmm.
a lower range of motion. So they're going on full range of motion like that, and a scoring system based on that. So even like wrist range of motion was a part of the equation.
Huh.
So they summed the range of motion scores across all of the major joints, and I think it was something like 20 joints, which is crazy. And then looked at all cause mortality risk, and as expected, the worse your flexibility score for the total, the higher risk for all cause mortality. So,
Hmm.
um, any plans to include some kind of flexibility training, into the approach?
Right. So the uh, the the irony of it is they've had head-to-head randomized controlled tests where they had one group of people who's doing classic stretching. We're going to be doing leg stretching and kind of bend over and reach your toes and that kind of thing, and another group doing strength training. So they're doing deadlifts and squats, and they found actually the people doing the strength training gained more flexibility than the people who were doing the stretching. So when I hear that, I'm like, okay, I'm good. And actually, when you mentioned that study, I'm like, that sounds fascinating. If they're going into all-cause mortality, that is my metric of choice. But I don't know then if they are the people who were flexible, did they get that from doing stretching, or did they get that from doing strength training, which could be just as good and also giving you the benefit. My desire is to find things as optimally as they can. So if you can get the stretching from doing the strength training, I think that's just the win. I haven't seen otherwise, so I'm interested in the study, of course,
Yeah.
to see how it kind of lines up with other things. I have one friend who thinks that to be truly athletic, you must be able to do the splits, Jean-Claude Van Damme style. And so he's works on that and puts effort into that. And I'm like, I don't think there's all cause mortality tied to Jean-Claude, like being able to do the splits between two trucks driving backwards. But if it's something that's key to you, then that's something that I'm also want to bring into the program as we come into the later stages of it. I'm looking forward to working with people and finding, okay, what do you like? We're going to give people the background so that they've got the exercise and they know how to do the routine. And then I'll want to say, okay, what is it? What would it be for you to be truly fit and to feel like you're meeting your maximum potential? And towards the end of it, I hope to help people focus on that. So maybe I will be adding the stretching program at the end. I don't know.
So I don't disagree with the data on static stretching versus the active movements.
Hmm.
And even if you take like a static stretch, like for a squat without being weighted, right? So if you're
Hmm.
just gonna try to stretch in a squat position, now you add a little bit of weight to a squat,
Hmm.
with whether it's a bar, holding kettlebells, or holding some weights. So you're going to get an increased stimulus. You're building strength throughout that full range of motion, which should further improve your range of motion in that given movement. So I see how it makes sense where the weightlifting can be a better approach than the static movements. But for example, if I think most people are focused only on the compound movements, so there are going to be ranges of motion where they may be limited in. For example, um, trunk mobility
Hmm.
stiffens during aging, so your
Hmm.
ability to basically form an L,
Hmm.
right? So you're standing up like a good morning, and then you're able to just
Hmm.
basically legs are straight, and you're able to go there.
Hmm.
So lower back gets weaker, and your flexibility in that. So unless people are training that, it's probably going to get more stiff,
Hmm.
and that stiffness in that region increases stress on the discs. So then even simple lifting movements may become, more risky because now you're stiffer in that range of motion, and in the region. So
Hmm.
anyway, I think it's a huge part of the. I've trained clients in the past when I was a fitness trainer 20 years ago. people in their 70s and 80s who never trained,
Hmm.
outside even of squats, just
Mm-hmm.
like I said, just trunk mobility,
Mm-hmm.
and just being able for them to go from a standing up position to even like 15 degrees of trunk flexion
Ooh.
was a
Huh.
challenge. So, and that's going to affect quality of life. Like if you can barely move, how would a squat wouldn't take care of that range of motion, nor would a bench press or a row. So I find huge value.
Hmm.
Granted, this doesn't mean you've got to be a yoga instructor or Jean-Claude Van Damme doing the splits,
Uh-huh.
even though that is the ideal. So when you think about too, just taking this to a separate place, like athletes, elite athletes who have strength through a full range of motion, not just static stretching, but strength in each movement. So if you're a basketball player and you actually train ankle mobility, expecting that you're going to roll your ankle at some point, but strengthening through those potential ranges of motion, your
Hmm.
injury risk is going to be limited. And a
Hmm.
big part of consistency is minimizing injury. So if your joints are all flexible through a strong and flexible through a full range of motion, you'd probably minimize injury risk, which should be good for consistency in training and quote potentially longevity. So
Yeah, like the specific training for things is a great idea. In general, I like to try and I don't know, I'm interested to hear like what you talked about working with people who are 70 or 80 years old. I do have some people who I've worked with on that, but they're exceptionally athletic ones. So I'm not seeing that kind of thing that you're talking about where they can't even do a little bit of a bow. Um, but we'll see. I have some of the people that I'm working with are older than I and are having more kind of a challenge of the posture for, say, the deadlift. And so I'm hopeful that the deadlift and sort of like learning how to get the posture right where your shoulders are down and back and that you're basically pulling up through will help them with some of their posture challenges as they're getting older. The strength training is doesn't actually add as much longevity as the high intensity or some of the other things that we'll be doing. But as far as quality of life stuff that you talk about, right? Like being able to have good posture and stay looking vital and be able to put your suitcase on the overhead rack, these kind of things are, or carry grandkids or whatever it is. As Peter Attia talks about, are very important, and the strength to deal with them, I think, is going to be a big deal. Yeah, it's something worth watching.
not just that, picking stuff up off the floor is basically
Hmm.
granted it's a flexibility movement, but there is some strength there because if you don't actively train
Yeah.
that movement, which is trunk flexion,
Hmm.
and okay, let's assume that you bend your knees, when you do that. Maybe I don't because I'm doing a hamstring stretch if I'm picking something up off the floor. It's like an extra
That's supposed
little
to be
bit,
good,
but
right? Like when I'm doing my laundry sometimes, like I try and do the back bend, right, so that I get
yeah.
the full hamstring stretch out of it.
Yeah, but if for most people they're not training that and
Hmm.
and aren't practicing it or have limited or poor flexibility, hamstring, lower back.
Hmm.
So I know maybe I'm repeating, but there could be a point at later in life where the back is so weak and untrained and lacks flexibility where, oh, now you've got a herniated disc because even just a small amount of movement is a strain on the discs. Whereas, if you properly trained it for decades, maybe not so much. Anyway,
But
I,
I,
I include it. I include it. I
yeah, but
think it's
I,
essential.
so for me, I mean, confessions, I never stretch ever. Um, and I was paying the price for that 10 years ago. Before I started doing the weightlifting, I couldn't touch my toes. And since then, I've gotten back into the squats and the deadlifts, and now I have no problem picking things up off the floor or touching my toes. So, and that's with never doing any stretching whatsoever. So, I think that it's a different road, but I think it can get some of that flexibility back where you most need
Yeah.
it in the
Yeah,
functional
definitely.
ability.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. All right. So next up, fasting.
Okay.
You've got some nightmare stories or stories on fasting here.
Yeah, well, it's only I mean, it's only for me maybe because I have a long history of it. So let's see here. Hold on. I'm going to come and start bringing up some of the research that I did. This has actually all come up because of a blog post.
Yep.
Um, so I was looking at some of the blog posts and seeing that some of the longevity and health experts, Peter Attia, Rhonda Patrick, were looking negatively at fasting And they thought it was a good thing before and it was going to help them to live for such a long time. And they decided, well, maybe not. So then they started to talk about, look, if you do fasting, you start to lose muscle, and it can be very difficult. So this is a study specifically from Peter Attia's website. It's hosted there. And it talked about doing fasting. And this is intermittent fasting, which is to say that you, within a week, you pick several days where you fast, don't eat anything for the entire day. And specifically, these people ate 0 calories on the fasting day. So it was a strict fast. So the result that he talks about when he says you lose muscle are basically these results here, where you can see we have 3 groups here where one group has got is doing calorie restrictions. This is just basically dieting, and they're doing 75% every day. So they're eating at 25% less than they would normally eat if they could eat what they wanted. And then we have an alternate day fasting. So these are people who are fasting every other day and then eating, and they're eating 0 on the fasting days and 150% of calories, so 50% more than normal on the days they eat. And then we have a third group where these people are doing alternate day fasting, but they're eating 200% of calories on the days that they're eating. So for them, you can see here that we have, this is the lean mass loss and the fat loss. So the people who are doing calorie restriction, and these are healthy people, by the way, these are already people who have a BMI under 25, they're lean people. They're basically losing all fat. So they're doing a great job, they're happy, they're losing just a little bit of lean muscle. But then the group that's doing the all-day fasting is losing half of that is lean mass and half of it's fat. And then for the people who are getting all the calories they need, then they're not losing the fat, they're just losing muscle. And so you can understand why someone would look at this and say, okay, this is a terrible deal. But I had been fasting, actually doing 5-2 fasting, which is where you fast 2 days every week, for about 10 years. And this was about the first 5 years was what I was doing was a protocol kind of like these, where I would go to 0, strict calorie, nothing. And I found just what they talked about. I found that I was losing a lot of muscle. Yes, I could rebuild it back, but I wasn't really maintaining as much as I wanted to. And that continued for a while until I went and read a nutrition book. There it is right there, my nutrition book behind me. And realized that one of the limitations of getting 0 calories is that there are almost all the cells in your bodies have mitochondria and can use fat for energy. But the key word there is almost all the cells in your body. The red blood cells in your body do not have mitochondria, and they can only survive with sugar for energy. So when you're in ketosis and you have ketones circling through your body, they can't use any of that. They have to rely on your liver to basically catabolize, to eat your muscles and make them into sugar so that the red blood cells don't die. So this is why with this kind of a protocol where you're going to 0 for your fasting days, you're going to be losing a lot of lean mass in your muscles. So another study then that is more like the protocol that I use, where instead they're going with a 25% of calories, maybe 300 or 400 or so. So here's another study, and this one was done with young overweight women, but it's another study pretty similar. It's about 6 months long. And they were also going on fasting and compared against people who were doing calorie restriction of just 25% less than what they would normally eat. And you can see here the results are quite different. So they're doing, again, 25% reductions, so 75% of their calorie intake. And then they're doing intermittent fasting, so 5-2 fasting. So 2 days they would have 27%. So 300 or 400, 500 calories a day. And the other days they would eat just slightly less than usual so that both programs are getting the same calorie intake. But you can see as far as the lean mass versus the fat mass here that it's much better if you get just a little bit of calories on your fasting days, that you're doing a much better job of cutting the fat and saving the muscle that you want to keep. So I've been doing this for about 5 years and was feeling like I was winning the game and I'm keeping my weight where I want it to be by doing the fasting. But when writing the article about fasting, I also wanted to cover time-restricted fasting. So time-restricted fasting, instead of fasting a whole day, you say within a day, I want to compress the time that I'm eating. So I'm only eating, let's say, from 8 a.m. until 2 in the afternoon or something, or like an 8-hour kind of fast sort of thing, or maybe until 4 p.m. or something. So when I started to look at that, I found a study that said basically breakfast is really important. So here's another study where they looked at the randomized control for time-restricted eating. And they had here some people who were doing early time-restricted feeding. So they were eating in the breakfast, lunch, and an early dinner at like 4 p.m. And midday time-restricted feeding, where they were eating at noon, starting with lunch, and then having a dinner at, say, 4, and then a supper at 8 o'clock or something. And the results were quite stark, despite both of them eating in the same time-restricted window. We find that basically, if you look at the body weight or the percentage of body fat or the body fat mass, only the early people had a significant difference from the control. So despite both of them eating in about the same kind of a time window, the only people who had the benefit for their effort was in losing fat and losing weight was the people who were eating breakfast and eating an early dinner or skipping dinner. So as I read this, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So if you're doing time-restricted fasting to lose weight, you need to be doing it in the morning and skipping dinner. But then I said, okay, well, let me look. How much, I know that you should eat breakfast. If you don't eat breakfast, you'll probably die faster with an increased premature death. But if you don't eat dinner, how much life do you gain? Like, I assume it's better to always skip dinner. So then I found this study, which told me I was wrong about all of that. This is the meal skipping and shorter meal intervals. And this study went with the N. Haynes study of diet, which is about 150,000 person years of data. And it's quite thorough. It's an American data set. And going through exactly what it is that people ate, whether they ate breakfast, whether they ate lunch, whether they ate dinner, how much time was between them, and then it tracks over 15 to 20 years or so whether they died early or not. And this one surprised me quite a bit because I said, okay, well, look, here we go. Yes, if you don't eat breakfast, you'll have about a 10% increase in all-cause mortality or premature death. But that's just the start of it. If you skip lunch, you're going to have about a 12% increase in premature death. And if you skip dinner, you're going to have about a 16% increase in premature death. So this surprised me greatly because this is the opposite of what I had expected. I had thought that this would be, okay, skipping breakfast is bad, lunch is so-so, and skipping dinner is a good thing, right? Sort of the old idea of eating a very, very small lunch or skipping a dinner entirely is a healthy thing. But in fact, all of them have about a 10% increase in all-cause mortality in the hazard ratio. And the study then goes on to say, in fact, you just should eat more meals a day. Like using 3 meals a day as the standard. If you only eat 2 meals a day, we have about a 7% increase. So it's just skipping 1 meal will cost you about a 7% increase in premature death, shortened life. And if you eat only 1 meal a day, or OMAD, you now have a 30% increase in all-cause mortality. So, and even on the other side of it, if you're eating 4 meals a day, so you eat an extra meal on top of that, now you actually have better than the people who have 3 meals a day. Now you have, it's a trend, it's not significant, but now you have about a 9% reduction in all-cause mortality. So when I looked at this, it was hard for me to justify going from this, that if you're eating 3 meals is good, 2 meals is not as good, and 1 meal is bad, that eating 0 meals a day was going to be better. So I basically now have changed my entire approach to fasting. And now I realize that the healthiest diet, if you will, is to get constant food in small doses throughout the day. Another stat from the same study is that if you eat your meals too closely together, less than 4.5 hours apart, then you have a 17% increase in all-cause mortality. So again, this is very bad. So I realized that basically by skipping 2 meals every week, I was increasing the amount of food that I would eat at the other meals by about 40%, which then, if you remember from the all-cause or the fasting before, I'll skip back to it, that if you look at this, you can see that even though this person was eating 200% of the calories, they were still losing weight. So your body's just not as metabolically efficient when you have too much food coming into it at the same time. So I've now, as of next week, I'm going to be stopping my 10-year habit of 5-2 fasting and learning how to eat 3 square meals a day. I don't think I'm going to go to 4, but at least 3 squares of meals a day. and eat with more reserve, because one of the parts of fasting 2 days a week is you feel like you can eat as much as you want the other days because you've already had a significant reduction in your overall calorie count. But it was quite a shock for me. But I live by the all cause mortality, die by the all cause mortality. So I mean, it's about a 10% difference. To put it in perspective, this is about the amount of benefit you get from eating 3 vegetables a day or eating 2 pieces of fruit a day. It's not as much benefit as you would get from strength training or doing high intensity interval. But at the same time, fasting would put me out of sync with the rest of the world. And so I always felt like I was kind of doing something a little different. They're going off to lunch. I'm like, I'm going to have a coffee with milk. See you later. So I'm looking forward to actually having more of a normal lifestyle, to say that I'm eating sort of the meals that are common with everyone, and hopefully we'll get some better health and longevity and blood work out of it as well.
All right, wait. So there may be some good news. Maybe you don't have to change the whole story yet.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
let's start all the way at the back. Let's start all. I took notes. So first was how did they assess lean mass? Is this DEXA or CT, MRI?
It's a good question. It's and to be precise, they had fat, and then they had fat-free mass, right? So
Yeah.
if they were losing bone mass or other things, that would also be counted as this. But I don't think they had DEXA. It was probably done with an electroimpedance instead.
Yeah. So not as good, but not that it is what it is. So that's
Hmm.
one.
Okay.
Number two is whole body lean mass. If this also included bone,
Hmm.
that's not necessarily ideal. If you're going to look at lean mass, and also, um, so whole body lean mass doesn't just include muscle, right? You've
Right.
got organ weights there, you've got connective tissue.
Hmm.
So we don't know that the quote unquote loss in lean mass is specific to muscle. Now,
Hmm.
if they one way that studies can get around this is by looking at appendicular lean mass, so lean mass of the arms and legs, because no organs, you do have some connective tissue, and that highly strongly correlates with actual muscle mass measurements.
Hmm.
So I haven't looked into this study, but
Hmm.
um, it's possible to have changes in lean mass and not have changes in muscle mass. So that's one thing. And now note that, granted, I'm in that continuous CR group. I'm just playing devil's advocate
Right.
here.
Yep.
Where
Okay. Yeah.
I don't have any skin in the game. I'm just trying to be objective and not jump to the Peter and Rhonda conclusions of fasting is quote unquote bad. So another factor to consider too in these studies is, and I didn't look at them, but if you're fasting, so I think the assumption when people are fasting is it's going to lead you to lose weight because you eat less, right? So you're fasting, you're eating less, but what about the overcompensation on the days when you actually have food, right? So,
Right.
and there are animal studies where if it's not CR, but if you take food away for one day and then you leave the food there the next day, they actually eat double on the next day and end up pretty close to eucaloric. So the assumption with the fasting studies, and I think fasting in the pop culture all over the interwebs, is, hey, if you're fasting, you're going to lose weight because you're going to eat less. That
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily have to be the case.
Right.
Anecdotally, I can say that I've had days in the distant past where I'd eat 6, 7, 8,000 calories in a day,
Hmm.
and eat it pretty early in the day, and then fast for the rest of the day.
Uh-huh.
Technically, I'm fasting, right?
Right.
Or eat 6, 7, 8,000 calories that day, fast for the rest of the day, try to fast for the next day. So technically I'm in that fasting window too, but I'm in a caloric excess. So
Hmm.
I don't know how carefully these studies are controlled for
Hmm.
calorie intake, which is a huge part of that equation, which goes back to, this is why I favor, for me,
Hmm.
and it may be different for others. If it works for others and your biomarkers are good, I'd say go for it.
Hmm.
I wouldn't. These are small randomized controlled studies in other people, which can be a good guide, which could be representative of the population-based average. But if being on a given fasting approach, like in your case, 5-2, helps you maintain a lean body weight,
Hmm.
uh, and which is a big part of this story, if that helps you stick to a calorie goal over a long period of time and stay lean, which is a big part of fitness and health and longevity, I'd say keep it there. And if you change your approach, or anybody changes their approach, and that messes up the system where now it's harder to maintain that caloric, whether it's close to maintenance or below, and stay lean, I'd say don't do it. Even if the studies show otherwise in RCTs of other people, it's all about, does that translate to you? So in my case, the time restricted feeding, I'm not doing it for any purported metabolic benefits or, in my case, because the diet is so rich in fruits and vegetables, if I eat later than, one-ish, or the majority of it by one-ish, I'm waking up more in the middle of the night. It's bad for my sleep quality. If it's bad for my sleep quality, I feel terrible in the morning. So for me, a shorter eating window is more beneficial. I don't see a difference in biomarkers. I've had the OMAD where it was 6 to 9 p.m. at night, not eating the whole day.
Wow.
It was terrible for my sleep, but I changed it not because of what the published study showed, but because it improved my sleep quality and performance. So I think sounding the alarm is too early on that. I think individuality and looking at biomarkers, is key.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So thank you. I brought that up on my blog post, but I didn't bring it up in my talking here. Because especially initially, right, when you go to time restricted feeding or intermittent fasting, either one of them is going to alter your sort of habits, and it's going to help you to lose weight. And can be a useful thing. That's one of the things I was using it for many years. So absolutely agree. That is one of the benefits of it. And that could be more than enough to make it worth it to someone. If that kind of having that routine of it to say, okay, look, I'm going to eat by this time, and then after that, I'm done eating for the day, and I've eaten the portion that I decide that I should be eating, then that's absolutely worth doing. And then can give you enough benefit to more than offset the fact that you might be eating a little more. And you're calorie restricted anyway, so for you, I see good things all over. So yes, I agree very much that it depends on sort of how you do it. For myself, I'm fairly disciplined, and I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to eat. Although other people who know me are less confident I'm going to be able to eat 3 meals a day and not gain weight, but I'm always up for a challenge, so I'm going to do my best and try and do that. And honestly, if it doesn't work, you're right, I'll be going back to fasting, because it's more important that I maintain sort of the body weight that I want to have than worry about sort of maybe a 10% loss here. I've got some buffer.
Yeah. So assuming that the 10% would translate to you, right? I mean, we'd have to see
right.
Some changes, whether is it metabolic health that improves? Is it kidney function, liver function, inflammation? If none of that improves with the change in, 5-2 to eating more meals per day, is there really any benefit, right? I like to see objective biomarkers rather than this blanket of, if you eat 5-2 or OMAD or X diet, this is the all-cause mortality. But I prefer greater specificity. What's specifically improving? And if nothing changes biochemically, have you really improved anything, right? So
well, that's exactly right. And in the studies, one of the things that's interesting is that as they work through them, they say, okay, we've had this person doing fasting, we've had this person doing calorie restriction, and it's known that there are benefits to doing calorie restriction and losing weight. Even losing a few pounds or so, even if you're very overweight, losing a few pounds is a huge change in the metabolic systems. And they basically found that both fasting and calorie restriction, the benefits that they have is basically the calories you cut out. So the tricky part about that is that if you're no longer still losing calories, and I had been doing fasting for 10 years, and so I had my own habits of eating more on the other days to compensate once I had reached the weight that I wanted to be at. So especially if you are using it to lose weight or even just to keep weight off, and that can be something that's very important. And it seems to me that is almost entirely benefit. They talked about autophagy for a while, right? The cleaning out of the cellular mechanisms within the cell and some other things. But at this point, there's been nothing that's really come up as convincing as a unique and independent benefit out of it, aside from the weight loss or control.
Yeah, I agree. Weight loss is the biggest thing, but I think the individuality is the big key here that you mentioned, right? And I think people trying the different approaches and seeing, whether it's OMAD, even if OMAD, what you showed, OMAD may be bad for all-cause mortality risk, but if OMAD leads you to eating less calories than you usually would, I think that's a benefit, regardless of what the studies and other people show, right? So, but I think the key is finding which of the approaches works for you to be able to stay as lean as possible, to carry as little visceral fat as possible, abdominal, obesity.
Hmm.
And for it, maybe it's not OMAD, or maybe it's not 5-2, maybe it is a CR, maybe, mild CR. But I think trying all the different things is a big part of figuring out what works at the individual level. So another thing to note
Hmm.
is aside from it's hard to control these studies in people, and granted, they're short-term studies, right? So 5 weeks or so. And granted, looking at animal models isn't ideal because it's not people, but
Hmm.
at least in mice, all the variables are controlled. How much they're moving, right? They're in a cage. They generally don't have an exercise wheel. You can control their calories. You can control when they eat and how much they eat. So one of the longest, calories, if you calorie restrict mice, but then shorten their eating window and allow them to eat during their normal circadian rhythm, which is during the night, not during the day. Mice are
Hmm.
nocturnal. Their circadian rhythm natural is nocturnal, whereas ours is awake during during the night, during the daytime, and asleep during the nighttime.
Hmm.
That's the longest lifespan extension relative to fasting alone. So
Hmm.
that's a big, but all of the variables are controlled. They're not overeating. They're getting a set amount of calories, and they don't have a choice but to eat those set amount of calories. So
Uh-huh.
I think, so that's what the animal model. So to me, that suggests what could be possible in people.
Hmm.
So that's actually the approach that I favor. But the other part too is satiety, right? So, and actually, there's two other variables here: satiety, right? So, which of these dietary approaches, in terms of how often to eat, how much to eat, one meal a day or two, whatever it is, are you satiated, right?
Hmm.
For me, I can end the eating window relatively early and be satiated without wanting to eat almost never the rest of the day. But
Hmm.
if I had to force myself, where it's like, all right, I ended the eating window at 1, and now 5 o'clock has come around and I don't have any more calories, that may trigger a binge, and that's detrimental to the whole approach. I generally don't have that because the diet is satiating. So
Hmm.
making sure your diet is satiating on any approach to be able to maintain those calorie goals is a big part of it. Now, the other thing too about fasting and lean mass, or fasting and muscle mass,
Hmm.
in my case, and I can't say if this is true for others, one reason I don't prefer the very long fasts, aside from the ending the eating window early, 1-ish, and then going for the next day, that's basically a daily fast of, 15, 16 hours. In the past, when I've gotten beyond that, when it comes to doing a workout, I have malaise. I don't want to do the workout. It's hard to be motivated.
Hmm.
And that's going to affect workout performance. And for me, my vitality comes from the workouts. If my workout performance is suffering, I'm technically on the road to declining function over time. And that's,
Hmm.
the antithesis of what I want. So that's just for me. Maybe for some people doing a long fast or fasted cardio, I can't even do that. I don't want to do that either.
Hmm.
It affects my motivation negatively. So I hate to say it comes down to figuring out what works for you, but that is, figuring out what works for you with the fasting approach, with the calorie intake approach, with satiety, that all factors in for it, for me.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like for me, I eventually like you get used to it, right? I think there's a certain period where you kind of set into a new habit, and like hunger is one of those things. Like if you eat a cookie every day at 3, and then one day you don't, boy, you really want a cookie at 3 o'clock. So I didn't find that. For me, I find I'm able to work out on my fasting days as well as other days. And was able to go through that, although my strength is usually down. I'm especially noticing that now, but now that I'm not doing fasting, maybe we'll have a bit of a change for it. Yeah, it's interesting. Kind of, we all have our own ways of adapting to these things, and I think there's giving it a try of a few things and then seeing what it is that works best for you personally is very valuable.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Next up, skin. What do you got on skin?
Well, I mean, I'm going to start this one out with another confession. This summer, I went to the beach and I scorched myself terribly. I was like, I don't even. I mean, I read a blog post on it and everything. Here's how you should do sunscreen. This is how it works. It's so important that you put this on, right? And I went out to the beach. And I'm just there with my friends. A typhoon has just come through, so we have some beautiful 1 meter high waves, great body surfing. And I do like I do every year, where I put on one coat of sunscreen before I get out of the hotel, and then another coat when I get to the beach, and then another coat at noon. But for this, I had a different brand of sunscreen, than I usually have. This was recommended by Consumer Reports and shipped from overseas. I don't know if it was older than I thought. It didn't actually have an expiration date on it. But usually when I come back from the beach, people ask me like, "Wait, didn't you go to the sun or something? You're still so white." But this time I was red as a lobster, and quite painful. So that's my confession to start with. So I think I kind of wanted to train from here, and then I wanted to listen to you, and hear some advice for what it is that you do for your skin. What would you say is the best way to take care of yourself?
Well, so this is where I've gotten criticized in the past, but people are like, so I do have some skin sag over here
Uh huh.
on my eyelids.
Uh huh.
So I was heavier at one point. I was as heavy as like 175 pounds,
Really?
35 pounds. Yeah, I was big gym bro,
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so carrying less weight, now my body has adapted where whatever fat I was carrying there,
Hmm.
now I've got a skin sag, right? So, and
Hmm.
that's in other regions of my body too. So I'd say, get lean, stay lean so you don't stretch your skin out
Hmm.
so that at some point now you're carrying around this excess saggy skin, right? And I'm not the type to be like, hey, I'll go for cosmetic surgery and just trim it down because that's how you end up looking like the scary mask guy from Saw, right? So
Right.
where you got everything's messed up. So
Huh.
that's one. The other thing too is this idea of doing it from the inside out. Like there are
Hmm.
things like carotenoids and some of the high fruit and vegetable intake,
Hmm.
nutraceuticals and polyphenols that can impact skin from the inside out. But
Hmm.
even that too, I'm not so sure on how much that can really make a dent, right? So what I did put together was some of the basic biochemistry of skin aging.
Hmm.
The thing maybe some people don't know,
Hmm.
and especially when it comes to sunscreen or moisturizers or even soaps, you know, um, these are things that can negatively affect our skin pH,
Hmm.
which can affect skin aging,
Hmm.
which can affect the skin microbiome, putting us at risk for having a dysbiotic skin microbiome, which can't be good long term. So skin pH increases during aging. So this is a skin surface pH in women and in men.
Uh-huh.
Two different locations. Skin pH varies based on location, which is kind of tricky because pH of the armpit, pH of the groin, pH of the palms, the hands, the
Hmm.
forehead, they may all be different. Technically, we would need different soaps or moisturizers
Hmm.
to impact the pH of these regions. But who does that, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, you can see the trend is the same. So skin pH plotted against age, birth through 100 years, women and men,
Hmm.
two different regions. You can see
Hmm.
the slopes are pretty much increasing. So it goes from more acidic, and this is log scale. So even though a pH of 5.5 versus a pH of 6.5 is 1 unit and doesn't seem like much, it's a log scale, which means that's a pH of 6.5 is 10 times less acidic versus a pH of 5.5.
Hmm.
So you can see that skin pH in both women and men becomes less acidic during aging. And that's important because, even though I didn't include stuff about the microbiome uh, too much here, but skin pH is a major determinant of which microbes are on your skin or not. So the changing pH can make it easier for some potential pathobionts to settle on your skin and to be able to colonize your skin, increasing risk of infection and all kinds of bad stuff for skin health. So when considering that skin pH increases during aging, and that's going in the wrong direction, youth being characterized by a more acidic skin pH, most soaps have a pH greater than 9. Now, we'll see why a high pH makes a difference or does it make a difference on skin pH in a minute. But in this study, and of course, we'll provide all of the study
Hmm.
references in the show notes and video's description. But they looked at 64 different soaps, and you can see 59 of them had a pH of 9. So
Huh.
if you're rubbing something on your skin that has a pH of 9 and your youthful skin pH should be somewhere around 5-ish, that isn't going to be good for your skin pH, which can, again, make it easier for the skin microbiome to become dysbiotic. Now, this study doesn't indicate which soaps are on that list. So I included a list from a different study that looked at common soaps. And here too, you can see the majority of them. I mean, 10, 12. On this list, there were only two that were even in the ballpark of having a pH of 5 or less,
Mm-hmm.
which would be, and I'm not promoting either of these. This is just what the data shows.
Uh-huh.
But it was, where is it? Dove liquid.
Mm-hmm.
So hand soap, 5.16, not bad. And then I don't know how to say it, Avicide, I guess, 3.61. So those would be the best of the bunch, with the goal of having it somewhere in the 5 region for a soap. So what does using soap do to skin pH, right? So that's what we'll see in this study. And they didn't indicate which soap they used, which is terrible in any study. This was a randomized controlled trial. Granted, it's small, 14 people. And they also used a shower gel, which they indicated the pH was 6, but they didn't indicate which one that they used. But nonetheless, skin pH. And then you've got 3 time points: before washing, immediately after washing, and then 2, 4, and 6 hours after washing with either the shower gel, water, or soap. Right? So you can see that after using that soap, immediately after, you can see that it's significantly different from the groups that use the shower gel, pH 6, and tap water, which should have a pH of around 7. So this was probably a soap that had a pH of greater than 7 in order for skin pH to go, from, or to be from 5.8 to jump to 6.4. And then at every time point afterwards, you can see that using soap pushed skin pH. And remember, skin pH increases during aging, so it's going in the wrong direction using these soaps. So I wouldn't say I'm anti-soap. It's just you want to use a skin cleanser that has a pH around 5. And I can tell everybody what I use, which is kind of problematic because every time I go to buy it now, it's out of stock and they're increasing the price. So I guess supply and demand. But the one that I use, I looked up the MSDS on it, and the pH is 5. So now, is that going to be best for my skin health? I don't know, but I don't want to chronically, push my skin pH higher, and then, with exogenous agents, right? And, Paul Saladino is, not to name drop, but, he's always talking about, these chemicals, you want to stay away from chemicals in toothpaste and soap. And on this one, he may be right, where you got to pay attention to what you're rubbing on your skin. Because it may be doing, and my daughter, my 15-year-old, she's constantly putting these creams and sunscreens, and you've got to know what you're putting on your skin, with specificity. Granted, and I'm not anti-sunscreen, but there may be things there to block UV rays, which are going to limit your ability to get burned. But if it's got other chemicals in there, which are going to be bad for skin pH and the skin microbiome, is it more harm than good? Rather than just being in the sun for 10 or 20 minutes without sunscreen and then getting out of the sun, right? So,
but for the sun stuff at least. So I can put it right here. I've got my CeraVe, right? This is a very common thing. I think Brian Johnson also used the same thing, which gives me confidence because I'm sure he could buy something more expensive if he wanted to. But I've been using, ever since I did the research on UVA on its presence throughout the day. UVB is what gives you the bright red sunburn, a lot of it. And a lot of the suntan lotions in the States are targeted at the UVB because it's sort of the one that is has more of a peak in the summer in the middle of the day, but the UVA is sort of with you all the time and it goes through windows and other things. So in my habit now, I wake up in the morning and immediately put in my contacts so I can see, and also put on the suntan lotion. But I'm really interested in what you're talking about the soap. Up until now, I've been thinking that the liquid soaps would be worse because sort of more artificial or something. But it's fascinating to think that, okay, well, actually, if you got a more gentle one that is more in line with the body pH, it might over time be better for you.
Yeah, it's not just the soaps too, it's moisturizers. So you'd expect that the moisturizers should acidify the skin. And even I have this in my book, I guess we'll put that in the show notes too. My book from 2016, which had a section on optimizing skin pH with the goal of minimizing, skin infections, which can then translocate into the blood. But moisturizers, which you'd expect to be good for skin pH, many of them are also in the same ballpark as pH soap, where it's 8, 9,
Really?
10.
Huh.
Yeah. So what you put on your skin is huge. Granted, how much, going back to the sun exposure, how much UVA or UVB we get is debatable, right? Because we evolved to be in the sun, right? So we need it for vitamin D synthesis. So if I'm in the boat where getting some sun exposure without any creams or anything on my face or body is essential, right? Now, what that U-shaped curve looks like with too
Hmm.
little being bad and too much being bad, I'm not sure, but
Hmm.
I try my best to get as much of that, small window to get some rather than too much or too little.
It's a good approach. Yeah, the avoidance is great, and then that gives you sort of the more confidence that you can get a little bit and get the right dosage. Hmm.
Yeah, I can say that up until a couple of summers ago, I was going for up to an hour a day in the sun in the summer,
Hmm.
and I started to notice some like white bleach spots on my arm, which is characteristic of sun damage. So I was like, this is too much. I got to cut back. So now it's at most 30 minutes in the sun. No, obviously no burning. That's been, minimized risk
That's obvious. Who
for,
would do that? Ouch.
but yeah, it's fun
Uh-huh.
being in the sun, being out, on the beach. It's fun, right? I
Yep.
get it, so.
Yeah. So then the other stuff, I mean, this is probably things that you're not going to do just because it's a cream, right? So I use tretinoin, which is Retin A is the brand name for that. Also, that's the prescription, which I goes through some hurdles to get a hold of. Retinols are very good. Those are sort of like the time proven gold standard, if you will, of a cream that then can reduce aging and photo damage and other things. I found it to be very frustrating trying to go through the studies to find out what is a good anti-aging face cream, just because the great majority of them are funded directly by the seller, the pharmaceutical company. And in general, I just can't trust them. So I just go with the straight, the CeraVe, which has an evening thing, and it's got some very long technical chemical words that are supposed to be good for skin, and I trust them and let them do the work for it. And then the Retin A. The other thing I've started doing for skin is collagen. I recently, for a while, I wasn't taking because I thought it was fully digested before it could be absorbed, so you're just getting the protein anyway. But they have found that there are collagen transporters that then can basically transport those amino acids directly as collagen. So it's supposed to actually have some benefit for the skin that seemed not to have been sponsored by a collagen seller. But it's something. I mean, lots of people are then doing things like you said, like they're getting sort of the Botox stuff, many other things to sort of smooth out the face. I haven't gone that thing, but I'm not sure. I still want to see if there's some other way. In an earlier trial period, I was doing actually acid washes, um, which I kind of like because I felt a little not that manly worrying about my face so much. So I got rid of some of that by saying, well, I'm rubbing acid on my face, which will then give you a red face and kind of peel some of it off. But I wasn't really convinced that it did it that much benefit. So at this point, I'm just putting on the suntan lotion usually, and then getting the Retin A, and then trying to take the collagen. And I'm open. I'll probably be doing more advanced things as I get older and have more things that I would like to improve.
And the skin is tough because it's, how do you, without doing skin biopsies from all the different regions, not just your face, like,
Hmm.
because as I mentioned, skin physiology may be different, at least in terms of pH all over the body.
Yeah.
It's tough to quantitatively measure. I mean, technically, you'd have to do one side of your face with your interventions.
Be
And who's going to
your
be,
own control, huh? Yeah, this is
yeah,
the
I'm sure you,
experimental side, the control side.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure you've seen the truck driver who's in the sun and you can see that there's sun damage on one side of their face, but who's going to do that? So that's kind of
Hmm.
the drawback there for me. It's how would I objectively assess if this is working or not? The other side of it too is I'm skeptical because, if the stuff that's been published to quote unquote work, regardless of being funded by companies or not, which is always a potential confounder. But where are the 90-year-olds if we look at them or older and we see they look like they've got the skin of a 20-year-old? Is it with all the creams and everything else that we've got going on for decades, right? So that's a rare thing. I don't think I've ever seen a 90 or 100-year-old where I'm like, your skin is a 20-year-old ish, right? So,
Yeah. Well,
but
the
that's it.
movies. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm optimistic,
Hmm.
that skin rejuvenation will be a real thing at some point. And maybe Brian, with his laser treatments, maybe I'm behind the game. Maybe he's ahead of the game there, and
Well,
that can keep the skin young. I don't know though. I don't
yeah,
know. It's hard to assess.
they should eventually be able to do that with like the, stem cells or something and just kind of grow it back. I'm looking for when I can get my hairline back from the stem
You,
cells, right? Or get your hair back, either way.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's going to be still better things are going to come there, but I would agree. Like I don't get the feeling that they have like kind of a one magic solution yet. It's sort of reactive things at this point that's sort of able to slow the tides, take care of yourself, and then hopefully in the future they will come up with some more of a Hail Mary that just takes care of the thing and fixes any problems you have.
Yeah, so I'm most interested in the skin as its barrier function and as a protective mechanism as a part of the immune system, right? So
Hmm.
skin infections increase during aging,
Hmm.
and the treatments to address those, for me, that's where I find the most interest rather than the cosmetic
Hmm.
of, is my skin more or less. Granted, I want to have elastic skin, I want to look as youthful as possible, if that's even possible, right?
Hmm.
But like my grandmother, just anecdotally, she was like 85 and she had like a chronic skin infection somewhere all of
Hmm.
the time. And,
Hmm.
it's just her skin barrier function or skin immune defense just, I guess, weakened over time where stuff could colonize. And then
Hmm.
she's got this perpetual, scab. So that to me, the science of that, I find that, most interesting for now and
Hmm.
being able, because is it topical antibiotics? Is it topical antifungals? For me, that's where I see the most interest right now.
Yeah, it feels like as we've been studying the biome and trying to figure out the gut microbiome is the hardest to access, and then after that we have the oral microbiome, but then the skin microbiome seems like it should be able to just you can just sample at any time, but at the same time it doesn't seem like they've really figured it out yet. So I'm hopeful that that will be something that they are able to then eventually just do a straight diagnosis and say, here's how we fix this.
But I've got it the other way. So I actually see it as the gut being the easiest to optimize and the oral being a little bit more complicated
Huh.
because it's just less studied, and the skin potentially being the hardest because, as I mentioned, the skin pH in all of the different regions is different. You could have a skin microbiome that's different here versus the bottom of the foot and the palms of the hand. So
Hmm.
you would need to technically sample from all the different regions and specifically target those regions, for some microbiome specific therapy or skin pH therapy or a cleanser, whatever it would be. So I see the skin as the hardest of those to optimize.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll have to see. It's going to access is easier, but it could be more complex. If you just look at surface, right? Isn't the skin supposed to be one of the largest organs of the body?
That too. Granted, you could say the intestine, when you uncoil it, it's like,
Hmm.
meters upon meters long, longer than we are in height, right? So it could be,
Hmm.
you know, but yeah, that's relatively easy. I mean, I can go through mechanism, but that's a story for another day, I guess.
I think so. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris, for